Guys, I am super excited to introduce you to Andrea Scher. I bought her book, Wonder Seeker, and I consumed it. I listened to it, then I had to order a hard copy. I made notes, I dog eared it. I love it. Her ideas and approach to awakening our creativity and looking for the wonder opportunities in everyday life really is amazing. Andrea's official bio, however, is she's an author, artist, and life coach whose work is driven by her belief in the transformative power of creativity for joy and well being. For nearly 2 decades, through her award winning blog, Superhero Journal, I love that name, her Creative Superheroes podcast, I also love that name, and her best selling e courses, Andrea has thrilled others with their own power to find magic all around them. Her new book, Wonder Seeker 52 Ways to Wake Up Your Creativity and Find Your Joy, out by HarperCollins, straddles the world of creativity and mindfulness, playfully inspiring readers to live more vibrant lives full of presence, joy, and connection. You can learn more about Andrea on her website, andreascher.com, and you can follow her on Instagram at Andrea Scher. She is amazing. I would sign up right now for her blog. I would definitely check out her podcast, and I am so thrilled she is here to join us for the Ripple Effect podcast. So let's dive right in. Well, guys, welcome to the Ripple Effect podcast. I am super excited to introduce you to Andrea Scher. Andrea and I became acquainted, as I mentioned in the introduction, just recently. I read her book over the summer. I went back, I went through the audiobook, and then I went and got the hard copy because I was so enamored with all the ideas and the approach that she takes. And I'm just so excited to have her join us for the Ripple Effect podcast. So, Andrea, welcome to the
Thank
show.
you. Thank
How
you
are you
so
doing?
much.
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
good, I'm good. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I am thrilled. I obviously I became familiar with you initially because I had a good friend that sort of put your book on the radar, and then I realized she had also connected me to Lori Wagner, and so there was that connection there, and I
Oh,
realized you guys were really good friends doing these events together. And you know what? I got to turn my lights on. That would help my video a little bit.
okay.
Sorry about
No
that.
problem. Yeah, lights,
Yeah,
camera,
lights,
all
camera
right.
always helps.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I have just been so enamored with your book. I really am
Aw,
excited to dive in and get
thank you.
acquainted with the work that you're doing and the approach that you're taking. But as you can tell from my background, one of the things that you're all about is superheroes, right? And
I
so
totally am.
I love that approach. So, with every good superhero, there's an origin story. And so I'm
Yes.
curious what your origin story is. So maybe tell us
Oh.
how Andrea became Andrea.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'll just start by saying I had a business for a long time called Superhero Designs, which was a jewelry business originally. And then it became my sort of life coaching business, like Superhero Life. And I just loved playing with this metaphor of sort of like the wisest, bravest part of you coming forward and being able to call on your kind of superhero self so that you're not looking for someone else to rescue you, but you really are sort of self-resourced in lots of ways, right?
Oh, I love that. Well,
Yes.
and in reading your book, obviously,
Mhm.
you gave yourself your own superhero name, and I love that
Did.
as one of the activities. So maybe could you expand upon that idea, for our
Yeah.
audience, and then, share a little bit about your name and sort of what you discovered when you actually, went and searched it up?
Yeah, that was really fun. So that whole superhero thing actually started with a friend of mine, decades ago. He gave me a superhero name at that time. He gave me Dre, which is, a
Ah,
derivation of my name. And he named himself Petro. And whenever we would go somewhere, we'd go to a restaurant or a cafe, and he would always give our superhero names. And it was just like this like fun, kind of mischievous thing.
that's
But
awesome.
but then he would also sort of call that part of me forward. Like I remember going to I was a painter at the time, and I was doing my first like one woman show in San Francisco, and I was nervous. And he's like, "Okay, Dre, do you have your cape on?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I don't have my cape on." He's like, "Go get your cape and then come back." We were on the phone.
Yep.
And so I'm like, "Okay, I have my cape on now." And he's like, "All right, just remember, that every single person you meet today, their life is going to be changed because they met you." And I was just like, "Oh, like what a
Whoa,
sweet, supportive thing for a friend to say."
absolutely.
But as we started playing with this, like, sort of metaphor and, like, calling on this other self, it became this kind of tool for me, almost like a coaching tool,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
what would the bravest part of me do or say right now? Or Peter would say, like, "If this was the movie of your life, what would you want that main character to do?" Right? So
Great question.
yeah. So it's in a way, as I understand it now, in the language I would probably use now is like calling on my higher self.
Yeah.
So, right? Like what does my higher self know? That the self that isn't afraid, isn't like worried about using her voice, worried what people think, like all those things that my sort of like, I don't know if it's lower self, but like whatever, a
Right.
fear-based sort of
Yep.
self
Yeah.
gets sort of tangled up in. So yeah, and I would just say as an origin story, this theme of using my voice and finding my voice it's been a thing. It's been a thing as a woman. It's been a thing as somebody whose voice was shut down by some trauma as a kid, and I really found it through creativity and through creative practices. So that's one of the reasons why so much of the book is based in that, because I really found my voice and my well-being
Yeah.
through creative practices.
I
Yeah.
love that. Well, so let's talk about the book for just a second. So, you were writing the book during the pandemic, right? And
Yeah.
that had to come with its own set of challenges, because here we are, forced into sort of forced isolation and all of the, really dispiriting challenges that we were facing
Yeah.
around the world, right? And so, was that one of the inspirations for writing the book, at that time, or had you already started it and then the pandemic happened? Give us a little bit of that story.
Yeah, so I've been blogging a long time. I've been
Yeah.
blogging since like um 2002 or something. And when they were called online journals, and
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
really truly like somebody's personal journal that they were sharing online. Um so I had been and then with Lori, who you just mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, this mutual friend, like she's been my writing teacher for about 17 years. And she was really my mentor in how do you tell a story that's true and vulnerable and intimate, that doesn't feel compromising to yourself, but has you feel actually really empowered and connected and
Yeah.
like you're sharing from a deep place, right? And so as I was doing all that in the blog and, getting a lot of readers and all that kind of stuff, I guess I started getting used to that. And then I had created a lot of book proposals over the years. Like so
Uh-huh.
many of us who are writers, we have this book dream, right, for a
Yep.
long
Yep.
time. And so I'd had a lot of book dreams, and they all had different titles and had sort of different, sort of configurations, but they were all basically the same book. Like I've been trying to write the same book for 25 years, right? And so it just happened. I think it was sort of divine timing that I had found an agent in the fall before 2020, and then by the time we finished the book proposal and getting it, ready to shop, we were about 4 weeks into lockdown, or
Yeah.
quarantine rather, and that was the moment when I think publishers really understood the need for my book and the
Yep.
need for this idea of like in a world that is very messy and chaotic and uncertain and insecure, how do you still find your way to joy and wonder, and how do you create that kind of well-being, and sourcing yourself, like I said with the superhero thing, how do you source yourself in really simple ways each day so that you can stay buoyant and you can stay resilient during any kind of season?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And as you tie that back to your superhero, you're really bringing that persona that you really want to be, that identity that's so critical. How much of that is tied into the creative space, right? Your artistic, or your artistic means, or through your writing and all of the different expressions of art and wonder that you can put out there. And oftentimes it's funny because you find a lot of folks that are maybe don't view themselves as an artist or a creative. They do these things in secret or in private, almost kind of afraid to share it with the world. And what
Right.
I sensed in listening to the book and reading it, this was kind of your introduction to say, no, 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 you've got to put on that cape. You've got to go out there and
Yeah.
put your best self forward,
Right.
and you got to lean into this creative, wonder filled approach to living, and
Yeah.
not only living but working, right? And adapting into this new world that we're all still trying to figure out.
Right. Oh, it's so true. I love that you said that because I do really hold creativity as something that we all have access to.
Yep.
It's like a muscle that we can reach for, and sometimes people have that muscle really honed and they're really into it and they go to the gym every day.
Yeah.
And other people are like, I don't know if I'm really made that way or I don't really orient that way. And that's okay. And that's why in the book I offer all these practices or activities as sort of creative, but they're not like, oh, let's make art, let's paint something, let's draw something. It's really not that. It's really about seeing the world through creative eyes more than anything.
Absolutely. I love that. And, we're going to talk a little bit about like the wonder dates and a few of the exercises that you've had, but I did get that. I mean, what I really enjoyed about the fact is that you tied a personal story to almost every one of these activities and sort of how it served you at a sometimes a difficult point in your life. Sometimes it was pulling you out of your shell. Sometimes it was sort of that old comfortable friend that you needed that kind of guided you through, some challenging times. And I think that creativity is one of those things that we just don't talk enough about, right?
Mm.
It's so important. It's kind of funny. I was at Walmart not too long ago, and it's kind of school supplies are kind of abundant now. They're kids have gone back to school at least in Texas, and they put things on discount, right? So there were all these new different colors, different types of crayons that weren't your typical 64. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And we were checking out, and somebody, the person that was checking us out was like, oh, do you have like kids? Or are they in art class? I'm like, no, this is for me. And they just looked at me like, are you nuts? I'm like, no, this is like, these are the
Are you
coolest shades
kidding
I've ever
me?
seen. But it's amazing how we often find that, we sort of the natural tendency for a lot of people is that, that
Mm.
whole creative thing, well, you gave that up as a kid, and really how much we need it as adults. I mean, can you
Mm.
maybe talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, gosh, that's so true. I mean, it's so natural for me that, like, I mean, you can see in the background, all my books are sorted in sort of a rainbow
Yeah,
fashion.
they're beautiful.
Um, yeah, that's like that is just my sort of go-to sort of way of being. So when I hear that, I'm like, wait, what? Who told you that? Who told you that that's how life was? That's not how life is. Um, yeah, and I think it is something in the culture that tells us to be an adult or to be a, if you're not, don't be flaky, don't be,
Yeah,
weird, don't be whatever. And so I love giving grown-ups in particular permission to play and to
yeah,
be creative and to um explore one of their, kind of kooky ideas or whatever it is. It's really just permission. It's really
yeah,
not that we don't have it in us, right? So, like, you may have even just given someone permission in the line at the Walmart to explore something in themselves. Like, they
yep,
saw those crayons and that thought came in of like, that's not, how a man is supposed to act or
yeah.
whatever, right? So I love that. I love that we can give each other permission and, I forget your original question, but, yeah,
No,
I'm
just
all about
just why that's important and necessary as adults, right?
Mhm,
To lean into that and embrace that still. Don't just, compartmentalize it or leave it to sort of what you did as a child, but really how to really readapt and sort of reacclimate yourself to that creative process, whether it be through drawing or writing or,
mhm,
just all the general exploring. Like you've got great, suggestions throughout the book, like taking yourself on these wonder dates, right? The getting outside of your comfort zone, taking pictures, looking at the surroundings and the environment. When I was reading your book, I had to tell you, because I tweeted you about this, because you put it as a challenge, like if you're on a walk or you're taking a hike, right, if you see something that resembles a heart. And it just kind of, it really spoke to me, because
mm,
for forever, every time we'd go out of town, I always look for little, my boys and I have always looked for hearts that we give my wife on Valentine's
mm.
Day.
Aw.
And on that particular day, I'm listening to that particular chapter on the audiobook, and I come across a perfect leaf that looked just like a heart. So I snapped a
Oh,
picture and tweeted it, because and then I had people ask me about it, like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, so I explained, kind of the process.
yeah.
And it's just like, you could just walk by that and never notice it, or you could stop and actually pay attention. And how different that, just that one little small act has to make an impact on your day.
Mhm. That's so true, and you're pointing to something great, which is that, like, where do we put our attention, right?
Yeah.
Are we putting our attention on, like, the news? Are we being sort of swallowed up into the vortex of the news, which is
Exactly.
really, really rough?
Yeah,
It has been for a long time. And that can feel like, oh, that is what the world is. It is the news and it is badness and it is like, all the things. And actually, there's yes, and what else is there? Right? So there's like 95% of the world is something other than that, is something else. And it doesn't get a lot of airtime
yeah, that's
on the
right.
news, right? And so we get in these sort of habits. I don't know if it's like neurologically like efficient for us, or actually I'll bring in the neurological thing because I talk about that in the book a little bit too. So this Berkeley neuroscientist named Rick Hansen. I've been to a bunch of his lectures, and he talks about the negativity bias and
Mhm.
how, as a holdover from a time when we were like chased by predators, we're always scanning for what's wrong in our environment still, even though that's not really relevant
Yeah.
anymore.
Yep.
And so we end up in this sort of hyper vigilant kind of red zone all the time, where even when we don't realize it, we're scanning for like, what didn't I do? What am I forgetting? What's wrong? Who's out to get me? Oh my God, right? And so when we can train our brain to scan for, also like scan for what's good, what's beautiful, what's interesting, what's
Yeah,
heart shaped, then we're actually training our brain and we're leveling the playing field and giving ourselves a chance of joy. Actually, we're giving ourselves a chance to experience something other than that hypervigilance. And we can go into the green zone of resilience and calm and well being.
I love that. I love that. And it really is. It takes practice, and it takes, a conscious reminder of to yourself to look at the world differently than we sort of have been cultured and trained, right?
Exactly. And so, I mean, I would argue that, like, if you actually went through this whole book and you did all of these activities, you would likely see the world really differently on the other side. You would be scanning for magic. You would be coming up with interesting creative ideas. You would feel hopefully, more resourced, and like the world is actually full of magic and beautiful connections and strangers that will delight you and all those things, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I find it's the perfect state change, right? When you feel like you're, maybe a little depressed or a little down, or you're struggling to, just kind of get your mojo going in the right direction, opening the book, looking at some of the activities that you've suggested. I mean, there's 52 of them, right? There's an abundance of ones that you can choose, but even where I've found myself, where I feel like the, sort of the heaviness of the day at the office has really gotten me down, just changing my space, getting outside the office, walking around, noticing things, just some of the reminders that you put into place, how different that affects my mood, and how quickly it changes my perspective on the day.
That's so true. Yeah, and you're making me think of, just even this well, I love this idea that I bring into the book called going off script,
Yeah.
which is really just, like, doing it a little differently, like, doing the thing you would always do, like, pick up your kids after school, or stop by the convenience store on your way home, like
Yeah.
whatever it is, and just shaking it up and doing something a little bit different. So I think in the book, I give the example of like, pick up your kids and say, hey, let's have popcorn for dinner and
Yeah.
go to the movies right now. Like my kids would be like, oh my God, that's so awesome. And they would probably remember it forever because it's not the norm, right? It's
That's
off
right.
script. So it makes it memorable. Or even something like this tomorrow night. I have a friend coming to visit me, and we could go out to dinner, and that would be super nice, but
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't remember it. But instead, I was like, "Hey, let's do a wonder date."
Yeah.
I saw that the Space and Science Center in Oakland is having, like, a star watching party, and they have their telescopes out. Let's have a wonder date after dinner and go see the stars. And, like, it's free, it's simple, it's right in my neighborhood. It's like but it's just even calling it a wonder date shifts the energy.
Yeah. Well, so explain that concept if you don't mind, because this is actually something, as I mentioned to you when I talked to you that we're launching this Ripple membership in September. And one of the things that we have sort of already planned, but we're going to reframe it with credit to you, of course, is we were calling them kind of walkabout ripples, right? Getting people outside and sort of just finding that creative flow. But some of the ideas that you've utilized in the book, I mean, we're really inspired by. But
Mm.
for our listeners and for our audience, just give them a sense of how you approach the Wonder Date, kind of what it is about, and sort of how easy it is to do.
Yeah, so it's really simple. It's again, it's like marketing. It's like, how are you selling this night out tomorrow,
Yeah,
right? Are
yeah,
you selling it as like, okay, let's grab some dinner and watch movies? Like,
yeah,
okay, like that
yeah.
sounds cool. That sounds relaxing. That's very comforting. Sounds like a
But
nice
pretty
Friday
typical, right?
night. Yeah. So really it's just creating an intention.
Yeah,
So if I say, okay, my intention is to experience wonder with this person, and wonder I think is always amplified when we share it with someone else.
yeah,
So that impulse that we have, like when we go outside and we're like, oh my God, it's a double rainbow. The
yep.
first thing you do is you grab whoever's next to you, doesn't matter if you know them or not. And you're like, look at it, and you have this shared moment of joy, right? So you grab a friend or your kid or whoever, and you say, okay, we're going to have a wonder date tonight. That is setting an intention.
Love it.
That is an intention. It may or may not happen, but it's an intention to experience something a little more magical. And so then you create conditions for that to happen. You go to the telescopes at the science center. You get popcorn and go to a movie. Like, it doesn't really matter, but just saying that it's a wonder date somehow
Yeah.
shifts the energy,
It does. I
right?
just love the concept for sure. And there's just, so many ways to do it, and so many ways to take what would ordinarily be just a average day or evening,
Yeah,
right? And really amp it up. And like you said, just the naming of it,
yeah,
automatically sets a completely different level of expectation. So let me
right.
ask you, what was your first ever Wonder Date that you went on? Can you tell us about that?
Ooh, well, I guess okay, so the first one where I called it that,
Yeah.
it was an experiment, and
Ooh,
I called the same friend, Michael, who I'm gonna go see the stars with tomorrow night, and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna do an experiment for my book." That was one thing about really fun about creating the book was that I tested out all of the activities, and I
yeah.
didn't know what would happen, and it was fun to just kind of road test everything. So I said, excuse me. So I said to him, okay, let's see if we experience more wonder if we create this intention of experiencing it. And like, what are some ways we can do that? So I was visiting him about an hour away, and I thought, okay, well, there's that buffalo milk gelato that's, like, incredible, so we have to put that on our list at this little market, and there's the ocean, and it might be cold there, but, like, whatever, let's go to the ocean. So we had this sort of list of things that we were gonna do, and it was interesting because what happened was the thing that I thought, like, "Oh, landing at this gorgeous ocean in California is gonna be this, like, amazing experience of wonder." And it really wasn't. It was like, "Oh, I've been to the ocean a lot." It wasn't like didn't blow my mind. It was beautiful. But then we had these really silly moments throughout the day where like one of them it was cold and we realized if we buried our hands in the sand, it was really warm and suddenly it felt like we were in this like warm bath.
Yeah.
And so like that was like this interesting moment of wonder. So it was just neat to see like we have this intention, does this, increase our chances of experiencing it? Are we tracking it? That's the other
Love
thing,
it.
right?
Yeah.
When you create that intention, then you're noticing it like, oh, I think this is a moment of wonder. And so it landed in us. We were looking for it, we were awake to it. And because there's a lot of wonder that happens and a lot of joy that we're just, it it just passes us by because we're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
naming it, we're not landing in it, we're not putting our hand on our heart and saying, "Oh my God, this is good, this is joy, this is well-being. I wanna, like, really let this in,"
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Have you found, through talking to other readers of your book or folks that have followed you for a long time and know this concept of wonder dates, have you seen the shift in people that often are maybe a little bit down or have struggled a little bit, to kind of find their mojo, how this can help shift that attitude and perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I love it that I'm the person that people, send those heart-shaped leaves to.
Yeah.
Like, I have this sort of steady stream of, like, Facebook Messenger messages where people are like, "Look what I
Yeah.
found." And, like, they know I'll get it. They know that I will be delighted by this great thing that they found. Um, Yeah, I mean, I think we're all looking to feel better, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to be human. It's tiring. It's anxiety producing. I think everybody I know has some level of anxiety. And we need ways to feel like first that it's normalized, which is something I really wanted to bring into the book, which is like, I'm an anxious creature. All these things I'm doing are really, for me, an antidote to a very sensitive and anxious nervous system. Like,
Yeah,
these things are self-soothing also for me. So, I think that, for some portion of, for my community, let's say, they really resonate with this idea of wonder and this idea of, um, even play and color and all those things, like, how can those just help us feel happier to be here, you know?
yeah, absolutely. I love that. I was thinking about the chapter that you have in your book about the wonder of you and discovering your superpowers, I'm curious, this what how have your superpowers changed since writing the book?
Mm, that's a good question. How have my superpowers changed? Well, I think, on that topic of really owning my voice and the way that I do things and the way that I communicate, I think it took me till I was 50 to have a book come out because I think I thought an author looked a certain way or wrote a certain way.
Yeah.
I thought, a real writer sits and writes every single day and it's really beautiful, whatever they whatever comes out on the page.
You've got these
Whatever.
images of Hemingway, stowed away somewhere.
Right. I have to be drunk. I have to be whatever, right? In Paris.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. So I think one thing that has shifted for me is like, oh, our, like, special brew, our unique way that life comes through us and our expression comes through us is so where it's at, and it usually takes us till we're 50 or more to be like, "Oh, the way I am is awesome," and the
yeah,
more I lean into who I am, the more that, like, the better life gets, really.
yeah.
So I think that I've really kind of surrendered finally, like, "Oh, this is the way I do life. This is the way that I wanna be with people," and allow people to meet me there.
It's kind of interesting. You use the word surrender, but do you think it's more of you finally just relinquished, the pre notions that you had to be a certain way, and now you're like, hey, look, I'm leaning in and embracing this, and once you realize, kind of, because I'm, we're of similar age, and I sort of in the last 5 or 6 years have really, found kind of my next gear in terms of creativity and sort of what I want to be able to do in the world, whether people embrace it or not. And it's
Yeah,
completely freeing because at the end of the day, the reward's internal. It's not the external, response that we get outside. It's the fact that we get to do it and we walk away with these experiences. Like you said, if you can do it with someone else, right? And you can share that experience, it's even better. But the reward, I think, a lot of times for people that are in their late 40s, early 50s is all of a sudden realizing I just don't give a crap what other people think. I'm gonna I'm gonna do it my way.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, and maybe by the time we get older, we just are too tired to do it
Yeah.
any other way.
I don't want to argue about it anymore. I'm just gonna go do it. Or I'm not gonna ask for permission. I'm just, gonna
Yes,
do it. Yeah.
right, the permission thing.
I
Yes, that's
love
so
that.
true.
Well, so one question I'd have back, to the superpowers though for a second is, so how do you think, we all could get reacquainted with our superpowers after, especially after the isolation of the pandemic? What
Mhm.
advice or guidance do you have there as people are still, I think even today, even though some, depending on where you live, life has kind of gotten back to normal, but I don't know what normal really is now and our new normal, but how do we sort of reacclimate and then, sort of find and really embrace those superpowers that you talk about.
Mm. Well, I think the best place to look is what feels like ease to you.
Yeah.
What can you do so naturally that you're like, "Wait, what? Other
Yep.
people can't organize a closet in, 20 minutes or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So I love asking people as a coach, I love asking people these questions of like, what do people come to you for? Are you the one that they always call when they're crying and, need some, someone to hold space for them? Like, are you the one that people come to celebrate? Like
Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
right? Are you the funny one? Are you the great storyteller? Like what is it that just naturally kind of comes through? And so that's a great place to look. And
Yeah.
then so like where is the E? For me it's like where's the fun and where's the ease?
Yeah.
And that is always that's how I write my path. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Things are getting a little crunchy. Like, how can I make this more fun and easy?
I love that.
And
I
if I
love it.
can't make it more fun and easy, is it actually a yes for me? Right?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's the other thing I would say is when we are sort of when we want to hone our internal GPS and be like, okay, what's next for me? What's actually in line with my spirit? What will actually bring me joy and satisfaction and purpose? We look to what feels like fun and ease and delight. We also look at what feels like a full yes in my system.
Yeah.
So I offer an exercise in the book, which is like, what does a no feel like in your body? And what
Yeah.
does a yes feel like? And for me, like a yes is like, it's like a, it's like a, ooh,
Yeah.
my heart opens. I lean forward a little. Um, I know I've tracked now, like, oh, I know what a yes feels like. And a no feels like a little, like a crunch, like a tightness, like a
Yeah.
contraction. And also it comes with certain phrases like, well, that would probably be a good opportunity. Like, there's like, you right? Like, I always know if I say to myself, "Well, it's probably a good opportunity," it's actually a no for me,
Yeah.
right? So I think getting clear on, like, not only clear on what your full body yeses and nos are, but practice saying no.
I love that. Yeah, no, and it's
Yeah.
and that's so freeing, right? And you can always, you always, can do it respectfully and you can say, "Hey, look, I appreciate you thinking of me. Thanks for the
Right.
opportunity. It's just not good timing and it's not right for me right now. Maybe down the
Exactly.
road." But when you can get comfortable, and I think that's hard for a lot of people, especially, authors, writers, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs in general. We all want to say yes because we're all trying to be accommodating to everybody. But
Right.
man, that's like a whole bunch of weight around on your back all the time. And so when you
Yeah.
can finally stop saying yes to everything and feel comfortable understanding what the yeses feel like and also
Mm.
what the no's are going to feel like and be able to say respectfully, no, I have to decline, but thank you for thinking of me. That
Yeah.
is huge in terms of just that weight that comes off. So I think that's,
Yeah, and maybe you just practice when, someone invites you to lunch and
yeah,
you're like, you feel like, "Oh, I should probably go to lunch with them. They did this nice thing for me," or whatever, and
yeah,
it's just like, "Wait a minute,
yeah,
tune in."
yeah,
It sounds like a no.
yeah.
So practice in the sort of low stakes world of lunch dates, and then you can, practice it at the higher stakes level.
I love that. I love that. One of the things that I really stood out to me because I'm all about for the ripple effect, all about connecting, finding unique ways to engage and connect with individuals. And one of the exercises that you talked about relative to your, the postcard, approach where you cut it up and then you sent it, to that person that's, from your past. But at the end of the day, it was a meaningful experience for you both, right? And those things those really stood out to me because those little
Mhm.
unique things that you can do
Yeah.
when you not only do it, does it feel good that you're doing it, the act of doing, right? But it's also how people respond and react when they get this gift, right? And that
Mhm.
really is what it is when you put yourself out there and you're willing to share your creativity and you're willing to take risks and chances in ways that are different than what everybody else typically does really stands out. I mean, it's
Mhm.
hearts and minds that you're really capturing there. And for me, it's all about, how you deepen that connection to that person. And so can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yes, I've kind of geeked out on this particular topic in my life. I think because, I struggled to feel like a deep connection in my family and I felt like they needed prompts. They needed, good questions, or they needed a game, or they needed some kind of intervention, like some sort of structure that helped us connect in deeper ways. And then other people have taught me, like my friend Eric, who I talk about in the book.
Yeah.
I was going through a divorce and I was having a very hard time, and I said something about that on my blog, and he saw the blog post, and we had lunch the next day. He had actually, it was just coincidence, he was flying out from another state, and we were able to have lunch. And he presented me with a pad of paper, and it had all this stuff written on it. I'm like, "What is this?" And it was a checklist, and it was like, "Dear Eric." It was like a letter from me that he had written to Eric, to himself. "Dear Eric, these are the ways that you can support me today." And he had this huge list of things that he could do, and
That's
all these
awesome.
little boxes, so I could check the ones that were yeses for me. And it was everything from sit quietly, don't say a word, and let me get it all out, to, you know, I don't know, just a whole, like, I mean, there were like
Yeah.
20 things on this list.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm just like, wow, like the creativity, first of all, and the love, like, wow, like the generosity is so inspiring to me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And I think anytime someone's willing to just be like, "I'm here. I have time for you. I see you. Tell me everything." Whew,
That's
that's everything.
huge. Yeah. And how, how rare that is in today's world, right? When, we might think that, putting a like on somebody's Facebook post or, shooting a quick text,
Yeah,
that has meaning, but it really doesn't. It's these exercises in creativity and doing something that gets people to stop and really recognize, wow, this person sees me and appreciates me for who I am. I think that's where the magic is. I mean, you talk about those magic moments, in your book and on your blog, and that's where I think the real magic is created in a relationship, and that can happen with, your romantic partner. It can happen
mm,
with your good friends. It can happen with your family, and it can happen with a complete stranger. When you've just engaged them for the first time, right? I think that's the beauty of being attuned to it and be willing to take the chances to do it.
that's so true. And, again, our mutual friend Lori,
Yep.
she turned 60 during COVID, so that's a big birthday, and of course,
Yeah.
we would have all gathered, but it was right at the beginning of COVID, and none of us could gather. So I gathered a bunch of her best friends from all over the country, and we choreographed a dance routine dedicated to her, which is hilarious because 'cause we're not
Oh,
dancers.
that's awesome.
It was so fun. I mean, we rehearsed for, like, 2 weeks, and we crafted this whole dance routine, and then we presented it and we presented it to her, and, it was so much fun. I think it was more a gift to us in the end, even to her, but yeah, there's just, like, so many ways to be together and love each other and tell each other that we matter. And
Yeah,
at the bottom of it, like, that sort of deathbed, thing that people say, like, how did you love? Like, that's at the bottom of all of this, right?
absolutely, absolutely. Well, your book definitely brings a lot of these great ideas to the surface, gives your readers a whole lot of perspective on ways that they can do that to create some really positive ripples for themselves and for the
Mm,
people around them. So, one of the things I like to do here as we wrap up, because I know you're short on time today, but with every podcast interview I do, because we do these things called ripple connection questions, and so they're just
yeah,
kind of fun, quick questions to kind of get a sense of your response on these questions, if you don't mind.
right.
Who did you want to be when you grew up? When you were a little kid, what was
Oh.
Andrew thinking? That's what I'm going to be.
I wanted to be a dancer on a cruise ship. Didn't that sound fun?
It does sound like fun, but why the cruise ship? Because you get to go to all these
You get to
different places.
travel. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, who do you consider a personal hero and why?
Mm, mm. Well, Sark has always been my hero, a big hero and a mentor for me. I talk about her in the book.
And did the
Um,
forward for your book. Yeah.
she wrote the foreword for my
Yeah.
book. Yeah, and I'll just give her the honor again of naming her. I mean, she really showed me, like, that you could write books a different way, that you could live life a different way, that you could, wear your pajamas all day at work, like all those things. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, yay. Somebody is showing me the way." She
I love
really,
that. I
yeah.
love that. That's fantastic. What's the greatest thing about what you do?
Mm. Ooh, well, I think like you, I love connecting. I love like the deep connection that I get to have with both my clients as a coach and in my circles and on the podcast. I get to have these deep conversations. And yeah, I think that's where it's at for me. Like I love art making and I love being able to like be by myself and get into that creative flow. But my actual impulse, like my more natural impulse is like after I make something is like, who can I show this to? Who can I make this with? Who can I teach how to make this?
Oh,
That's
I love
more of
that.
my orientation.
That's great.
Yeah.
What is the best thing you could hear a colleague, client, friend, or family member say about you?
Mm, that they feel better about themselves after they're with me.
Well, I will say that because I feel a whole lot better now that
Oh,
we've
good.
gotten to have this conversation. So mission accomplished for sure. And my last question, well, second to last question, but what
Mhm.
what does the ripple effect mean to you?
Mm. Ooh, that's a great question. So I think to me, I mean, I love that metaphor that I'm sure you're drawing on of like the ripple in the pond, and we
Yeah.
drop our expression, whatever that is, we put ourselves into the mix, and it has an impact. And so the idea of um, knowing that and sort of managing our energy or I actually talk about this in the book, for example.
Okay.
It's like, I think it's called, this is pulled from Michael Franti, Sprinkle Your Sparkle.
I love
Like,
that.
like
Yeah.
he was saying, I know that every time I walk into a room, I have the opportunity to make an impact, or I have an impact just by default. And
Yeah.
so to really own the responsibility of that and the power of that, and it's not because he's Michael Franti that he has that power and responsibility. Like
Right.
just
Every
knowing
one
that
of us.
every
Yeah.
time we walk into a room, we have the power to uplift and to inspire, to bring more joy, to bring more well-being, whatever it is. I'm all about it.
Yeah. Well, you definitely are doing it, right? You're creating some really positive ripples for everybody that gets the opportunity to experience your writing and your work and, the creative workshops that you put on and all the different ways that you are expressing this really unique approach. And I think it's something that the world really is desperately
Mhm.
hungry for. So,
Thank you.
keep doing it. I think it's fantastic. My last question is, what kind of ripple can I create for you?
Ooh. Ooh, let's see. Well, I mean, I love that you're broadcasting this show and I get to reach people that, love you and wanna learn from you and be inspired by you, so I'm honored for that. Um, yeah, I'm not sure beyond that. Thank you, though.
Well, so just know that the offer stands. And so,
Okay,
if you come up with something, I have Ripple will travel. I'm
nice.
happy to help any way I can for
Thank
sure.
you.
So, before we wrap up, let everybody know how they can get in touch with you. And we'll definitely put your links in the show notes, but I want to make
Great.
sure that they follow you on the channels that are most important to you.
Yeah, thank you. So my website is andreascher.com, AndreaScher, and Instagram, same, Andrea Shear, and that's where you can find all my events and, retreats and classes and everything else.
And you have a lot of good stuff coming up. So I encourage
Thank
everybody
you.
to be sure to go to the website, and you have a newsletter, right? So you can
I
sign up for
do.
the newsletter to stay informed about what's happening. And you do an excellent job there. So I encourage everybody to go out there and do that. Andrea, it is such an honor to have you on the
Mm,
Ripple Effect podcast. I am so grateful you said yes. I am excited to, continue the conversation at some point in the future and find some other ways that we might be able to ripple together.
Thank you so much.
Well,
My
you take
honor.
care. Thank
All
you. I
right.
appreciate it. Have a great day. And as always, ripple on.
You. Thank you.